Hey, everybody. I am Haley Gray, and I'm the founder of the Women's Entrepreneur Network and Intuitive Biz Solutions. I am a marketing geek. And one of the things that I very much appreciate is knowing your numbers in business. And a lot of that comes back to your bookkeeping. And I cannot tell you how many people I see that just spend random amounts of money on their marketing and they have no idea about the back end. Are those clients actually profitable? Did they actually make any money on that advertising campaign? No clue. And they have absolutely no idea where anything is. So we're here today and we are super excited to have Melissa and Tamara here from Books Time. Welcome, Melissa and Tamara. So happy to have you here and joining us today. Tell me a little bit about what it is that y'all do and about your business.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll get started. Can you hear me okay? No background noise?
Yeah.
Perfect. So Books Time, just a little bit about Books Time first. It was founded back in 2016. One of our founders, Sonia, she was working for KPMG, realized that she wanted some more work-life balance because it was really hard balancing motherhood, career, everything all at once, but also wanted to make sure that she was serving small businesses because the big four accounting firms are really thinking about the bigger companies. So Books Time was really created as a way to support small businesses, help make sure that they had opportunities to have affordable, high-quality bookkeeping services. And since then, we've been consistently growing, working with mom and pop shops all over the United States. I'm based in North Carolina, so I really like working with North Carolina businesses, specializing in real estate, construction, nonprofit, but really agnostic to industry as a whole. I missed part of the question. What was the next part of the question?
I was saying, just tell me a little bit about the business. So I think you got the question answered. Yeah. So let's go ahead and hit this hard. So I work with a lot of people doing ads and a lot of people doing marketing stuff. So the big question is, at the end of the day, how do you know if it's being profitable?
Melissa, I think Melissa's going to take that one. Did you just breathe? There we go.
Yes, I froze, but I'm unfrozen now. So having a look at the income statement will show you on paper if you're profitable. So you want to pay close attention to the gross profit. That's going to show you your revenue and then the cost of actually producing or providing that service that you're providing in your business. So another thing that you want to pay careful attention to would be the cash flow statement. It's divided into the 3 sections. Operating is going to show you, are you generating any cash inflow from just the operations? And then you're going to have the other parts of the cash flow statement as well that show you where is that money going out, and did we purchase some assets? Did we receive some income, or not income, but cash inflow from maybe loan proceeds? So you want to have a look at the income statement as well as the cash flow statement. But the basis of all of that is, how are the transactions categorized, and are they categorized properly? Because if they're not, that can lead to information that's not reliable as far as profitability. So the best way to understand whether a business is profitable starts with that bookkeeping, that solid foundation of categorizing the transactions properly, and then that translate into the different financial reports that you can use to conduct further analysis on profitability. So a lot of times clients as well confuse profitability with cash inflow. They think they have positive cash inflow, so they must be profitable. And that's not always true. And that's why it's important to have those proper financial statements in place.
Absolutely. So tell me, okay, I get the financial statements. The specific question I asked was, how do you know if an ad campaign is paying for itself?
You can segregate the revenue and the costs related to that revenue into little buckets by themselves. So you can look to see the results of a specific campaign or a specific product. You can segregate those out to determine, did this marketing campaign generate this revenue? And that's tied with other informational resources as well. So marketing, for example, you'd want to know, did this sale result from that marketing lead? So was this sale related to that campaign? So there are ways to handle that in the general ledger with different accounts, or just using a class system to keep those kind of buckets separately and then tie those into the marketing information that you have coming in related to the campaigns.
Gotcha. So tell me, What kind of accounting software do you guys use?
We use whatever the client uses. So we do prefer QuickBooks just because it's so user-friendly. It's relatively inexpensive, and there are different levels. So depending on the size of the business, the complexity of the business. So that's the software we prefer, but we use anything the clients use. There's a free software called Wave. Some of our clients will use that for very, very small businesses. They do have a very inexpensive, a little bit higher level subscription service as well. So just whatever our clients use, that's what we use at Bookstime.
That's awesome. Yeah. And, it's interesting to note that there are a ton of different types of accounting softwares out there for small business. And, if one doesn't work, the other one might, but it's kind of important to get started early. So what do you find the biggest leaks are in small businesses and in businesses in general
from a cash perspective, I would say just not understanding where the cash is going or how it's coming in, or it could even just be the timing. So if you're on an accrual system instead of cash, you can have generated revenue in 1 month, but the cash may flow in 1 or 2 months later, or the client may never pay. And so that cash flow is never going to come in. And so just understanding how accrual accounting works, how the accrual bookkeeping or cash based. So just understanding those basics really help to understand the cash portion of that.
Right. So, one of the things that people make the mistake of a lot is commingling funds. So tell me a little bit about that.
That's very common, and it's really critical to separate those. So especially from a compliance issue, from tax purposes as well. So if you are commingling your personal expenditures and you're categorizing those as business expenditures, they're not really deductible because they weren't related to the generation of revenue within the business. And so we do see that quite often. And so we stress not to commingle. And if you do, take a really good look at the books of what you've recorded and make sure that those don't need to be separated out, that those were actually business expenditures. There's also a misunderstanding of what can be considered a 100% expense, for example. Not to give any tax advice, but I do see a lot of clients that think that meals and entertainment would be fully deductible on a tax return, and those aren't. So just knowing how to record those, to categorize those properly.
Right. Yeah. So
I think she just froze. Is it okay if I jump in very quickly? Because I don't know that all small businesses know what commingling even means. I'm just thinking, as someone who has worked in small businesses before, I don't always know all the terminology of it. But basically, when you have your first card and you're swiping that for a business purchase and you're putting everything, whether it be dinner for your family, along with some equipment for work, all on the same credit card, that would be considered commingling. You can't have tax exemptions or deductions for the dinner that you have with your family, even though you might be able to put it as a work for the equipment. And so we want it separate so it's easier to.
Right. Well, and the thing to remember too, and this is not legal advice, is that when you commingle funds, you open yourself to legal liability in your business. Talk to an attorney and understand this. But this is one of those things that not only does it create a nightmare for your CPA and your accountant and your bookkeeper, but it also can cause you bigger headaches that you don't even realize are possible.
Yeah.
So, tell me, give me a story of some time that you were able to come in and help somebody really straighten out some numbers in their business.
Yeah. I will give a very brief story of this with a nonprofit organization we work with. This is public on our website, so you can actually read a little bit about this case study that we did. But there was a religious nonprofit institution that we were working with who found out that their previous colleagues were embezzling money and their old bookkeeper didn't catch it. It's a religious organization. So already there's a lot of trust and a lot of, I think, interpersonal relationships that the staff members have with the people who participate in the organization, that for there to be something like embezzlement happening, it really creates a lack of trust in the organization. And so we had to come in, do a thorough review of their books, figure out where the investment was coming from, what was going on, and try to rectify everything in tandem. And it wasn't just about making sure that the books were clean at that point, but it was also making sure, how are we telling a story about how this organization is able to get back on their feet, rebuild the trust of their community, and make sure that moving forward, we have checks and balances in place so that this doesn't happen again. And from my understanding, because again, these are outsourced clients of ours, they've been able to rebuild that trust of their organization. They were very transparent with the people that they work with about what happened and what they've done to rectify the situation. And we've been working with them ever since.
Right. Well, and I think that that's an important step here, right? Is, you know, acknowledging that mistakes happen, and mistakes are gonna happen. Like, I don't care what your education is or your background or anything. I mean, I know I've made my fair share. It's that what you do with it once you make that mistake and how you fix it going forward.
Right. Absolutely. I feel like all business owners are just like constantly learning how to run a business and do everything all at once. And I always invite them for that.
Yep.
And managing the books is not necessarily the thing that all of them think about at the very beginning. And it's a very important piece of it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Melissa, do you have a story you'd like to share?
I have a couple of stories. One of them is not related to Books Time, but I was reviewing the books for a client previously and realized that their software had not recorded all of their revenue for quite a few years. And because there was no reconciliation of the accounts receivable journal, making sure that all the invoices that showed open in the books actually matched what actually happened. So there was no one really checking that. And so the result of that was they had to go back and refile amended tax returns to report that revenue, and they got it straightened out. But it just took someone going in there and just having a look to make sure that everything was recorded properly and that the software was even working properly. Another example would be a client, back to the personal expenses. They thought that they could go to a meal every day, and if it was during work hours, that they could fully, record that as a 100% deductible expense in their books. And so we got that cleaned up and got that corrected. They actually had been audited the previous year, which is how they discovered the problem and then brought us in to get that corrected.
Yeah, that can be a pretty big one overall. It's a big deal. I think that people don't really realize that, it can trigger an audit or worse, at times, fines, penalties, etc. So what do you do in a situation where you've got a client that's in that, they're being chased down by the IRS? Now, what do they do?
That we leave. We don't provide advisement services, but we do refer them back to their CPA or their, CFO or their tax advisor. And if they don't have one, then we do have those partnerships, which is another benefit of building those partnerships. We do have someone to refer them to. So for advisement services with any tax issues, we would definitely refer them back to their CPA or their tax advisor.
Very cool.
I'll also say that we'll communicate with the CPA and tax advisor. So while the legal and the tax implications fall on them to handle, we're in constant communication to make sure that we're completing the books on time, or if we're past a deadline just because the client waited too long for filing, that we're working with them to handle that on a reasonable time period.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's an important thing, is having everybody who's involved communicating, because sometimes the client, knows or doesn't know, but they're super busy. But if they're having to play telephone operator, it's really hard to.
Right. And one thing that I do like about how we communicate with the CPAs as well is that, as from working in a small business, I don't necessarily know all the terminology about bookkeeping. And so if a bookkeeper is coming to me telling me, here's what's important to translate to the CPA, things can get lost in translation. It's important for all of us to be on the call because I am the business owner and I need to understand what's going on in my book. But to ensure streamlined communication, having everybody looped in is really, really helpful.
It's that communication, keeping things up to date. How often should a small business or a business reconcile their books?
I am a big proponent of reconciliation every month. And for larger businesses, I would even recommend maybe a mini reconciliation every week. For even more complex, maybe every day, depending on the number of cash transactions that are coming in and out of the bank account. But definitely once per month.
Yeah, absolutely. So if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that?
They can go to our webpage at bookstime.com, and there's a form that they can fill out, or we can provide contact information as well. Tamara, do you want to jump in on this question?
Yeah. So I don't know if there's a way that we can publish this, but basically my email is my first name dot last name, tamara.zishuk, skip the learner part, at bookstime.com. On our website, there's a way to book a call with us. You can message us on any social media. Feel like we're really easy to access.
Yeah, love it. Love that so much. Yeah. A lot of people struggle with finding a good bookkeeper and keeping books up to date and all the things. I can't tell you the horror stories I've heard, but I'm guessing you've heard them too.
Yeah.
Well, can I tell a little bit about a horror story from my previous work experience? I used to work in the nonprofit space, and part of the reason why I switched into this world is because I saw behind the scenes what was happening when people were managing their books properly. I worked for a big nonprofit in North Carolina and noticed that monthly reconciliations weren't happening. We didn't have a bookkeeper doing the books regularly. So when it came time to end of year reporting or even updating our donors about where their money was going and what it was being used for, or just knowing how much budget we had to plan an event, we didn't have all the information there and we had to do a lot of guesswork. And then at the very end, we're doing a really big catch up and clean up project. So seeing that, knowing that donors are trusting us to put their money in the right places, knowing that as a program professional for these types of work, I needed to know how much money I actually had to spend, because unlike a business where it's for profit, every single dollar is allocated to a very specific budget. I really need to know these things, and we didn't have these answers. So seeing what happened in the mess that it causes versus now seeing what happens when you're being proactive about managing your books is so important to me, especially in industries where, like, again, it's a trust and it's a storytelling piece of having that on paper and being able to understand those reports.
Well, I mean, and it's not just like, the trust, but like, how do you know how much money you have if you're not doing any of this stuff?
Right.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
clients are
Guessing isn't helpful.
they're making business decisions based on the data they're looking at. And if the data is flawed, then it's going to be a bad business decision potentially.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's across the board, whether it's accounting or marketing. And the thing about marketing that what I do that most people don't realize is that fundamentally the numbers have to number, the math has to math. But if you're not tracking it, you don't know where you're spending your money, and you don't have a way to track your campaigns, and you don't know which clients are coming from where. So for instance, if I'm advertising in this magazine and I'm getting really crappy, cheap clients that never pay their bills on time versus, I ran this other ad campaign and advertised to this other neighborhood and I got the most amazing clients. But if you're not tracking it, you have no idea.
Yeah.
You just think it's like word soup.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even with that, we've talked to a lot of startups, and a lot of them want to wait till after they generate revenue to start setting up their books. And you need a chart of accounts from the second that you start making money, because otherwise everything's going to be crazy when you start to actually try to categorize everything. So being proactive about it is also just something that's super important.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And to add to that, again, not tax advice, but a lot of startup costs, even though they don't have revenue coming in, those can have special tax benefits. So those need to be tracked and recorded as well, even before that revenue comes in.
Yeah. And there's a lot of tax deductions and other things out there. And this is a talk to your CPA and, look at your current tax laws. There's incentives for buying certain things or getting certain funds of revenue. There's Google grants, there's Facebook grants, there's all kinds of stuff. But if you're not setting this stuff in the beginning, you won't get any of that.
Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
I appreciate y'all. Thank you for being here, y'all. Check them out at bookstime.com and get your books up to date. We'll chat later. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.